Defund them or disband them? Why them versus demand them? Racial profiling versus stops that are supposedly random. If we build it, they will come. Back in the day, they came with diseases, treaties, and guns, but now they come with bulldozers and city-sanctioned construction crews to give oppressive makeovers. We send our kids to you for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, seeking knowledge and not judgment, achievement and not discouragement, paying taxes to a government that funds the system but doesn't give refunds when the system systematically decreases the chances for advancement that we all deserve and hope for. I'm sick and in need of attention, but your attention is wrapped up in the retention of stupid stereotypes, believing that my problem is not what ails me, but what I look like. Join us and talk to Tingz.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Talk to Tingz. It's been a minute. We haven't been with you guys for a couple of months, but we would not disappoint. We're back for Black History Month, of course, right? You thought we wouldn't be here? Come on now. We're back for Black History Month, and we have an amazing topic for you tonight. We're going to be looking at gentrification, right? Our neighborhoods, their plans. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you all quickly, for those of you who might not know, and maybe this is your first time joining us or your first time watching us on YouTube or whatever, we are GIA Productions, and we are a performing arts group that uses spoken word, drama, dance, and other mediums, right, to entertain, educate, and empower our communities and our audiences. We have had the opportunity to perform at the Toronto Fringe Festival. We've performed at the Sandbox Theatre in downtown Toronto, as well as public libraries, churches, schools, community centers, you name it, we have been there. And we are just thrilled to be here with you tonight to have this amazing conversation that I know you all are going to be very much engaged in and engaged by. So, as I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about gentrification. And I'd like to give you a definition. If we can, there we go. There it is. Man, these guys are on point. So, gentrification is a process in which a poor area of a city experiences an influx of middle class or wealthy people who renovate and rebuild homes and businesses, which often result in the increase in property values and the displacement of the earlier, usually poorer residents. Okay, so that's a quick breakdown for you of what gentrification actually means and what happens in gentrification. We're going to go into more detail as we proceed with this conversation. Real quick, gentrification is a worldwide phenomenon, right? I don't know if you can see my hat there. Brixton, okay, BRXTN. That is short form for Brixton. It's a South London neighborhood. And this neighborhood was actually established around the 40s, 50s. A lot of Black immigrants from the Caribbean going to England at that time actually established Brixton. But later on in the 2000s, gentrification or urban renewal started to take place, and Caribbean restaurants were soon replaced with expensive French and Italian restaurants. And the residents were soon unable to afford the cost of living in that neighborhood, and they started to disperse. And Canada also has a history of this as well. Little Burgundy, an amazing community in Montreal. As a matter of fact, Oscar Peterson, world famous pianist, came from Little Burgundy, as well as Michael Jean, our first and only Black Governor General, also came from Little Burgundy. But in the 1960s, Montreal got a new mayor, Jean Drapeau, and he saw Little Burgundy as a slum, or started to talk to the media and call it a slum. It's believed that really what he didn't like was the fact that at the jazz clubs in Little Burgundy. At one point, Little Burgundy was known as Harlem North because jazz was just booming in Little Burgundy. And he didn't like the fact that white people and black people were actually mixing and mingling at these jazz clubs. So he started calling it a slum. And before you know it, he decided to proceed with urban renewal, and Little Burgundy changed up. And it's still a neighborhood in Montreal now, but it looks very different, vastly different than it had prior to the 60s. As a matter of fact, Little Burgundy's history went all the way back to the 1800s. And they got rid of it and changed it up. Same thing happened with Hogan's Alley in Vancouver. Again, the only Black community in Vancouver, and they have not had a Black community in Vancouver since urban renewal. They started calling it a blight. And you might ask what a blight is, and that's a thing that spoils or damages something. And that's how they started to refer to Hogan's Alley as a blight, and they started removing basic services like garbage pickup, and just to make it look worse and to justify what they wanted to do to it. And then again, in 1967, the city of Vancouver made this decision to destroy this community for a highway that never was built. The same thing with Africville in Nova Scotia. Africville was a predominantly Black neighborhood, and they started to do some really interesting things. The city moved a prison near to Africville. Then they moved a large open garbage dump, a fertilizer factory, an infectious diseases hospital, and then started saying, you know what, this place is a slum and we need to get rid of it. And they compensated the families that were displaced with $500, brought garbage trucks to forcefully move them out. They had to load their luggage onto garbage trucks, and they were moved out. And then now we have Little Jamaica here in Toronto, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more, and what's happening to Little Jamaica and all the businesses that have been impacted by Little Jamaica. And it's a place that's dear to my heart because my family actually, before I was born, lived in Little Jamaica. So when they came from the Caribbean, that was the first place that they went. And then shortly after, let me say this, I was actually conceived in Little Jamaica. And then we moved, the family moved to not too far away to Vaughan and Sinclair. And then I was born. But Little Jamaica now is going through what we might call a gentrification process. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. So all of that being said, let's dive into this thing. We're going to talk about Black communities versus communities with large Black populations. We're going to talk about revitalization versus gentrification, all of these things, but we're going to dive into it right now. Let me introduce the panelists, right? And I want to get these the accolades for these panelists right, because we have an amazing panel for you tonight. And we're going to start off with Lance Marrero. Lance joins the panel with over 20 years of experience working with youths. He doesn't look like he could have 20 years because he only looks like he's 20 years old, right? That's how we do, all the yam and banana, just, you can see it, man. You look good, brother. All right. And he has experience working in the community, particularly in the East End. His focus has been in community development, health and wellness workshops through the anti-oppression framework. So I want to say welcome, Lance. How you doing, man?
Thank you for that greeting. Blessings, brother. Thank you so much. I'm doing well tonight. I'm really excited to be here. Can't wait to get this conversation started and really dig deep into this topic. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up is Chosen. All right, and Chosen is a serial entrepreneur, community activist, and educator. He's been organizing fundraisers since the 4th grade, right? And started his first business at 14. So we are dealing with a man who has had his eyes on the prize from the time he could walk and talk. Always knowing the essence of the person he is, self-reliance and social change were always top priorities for him. Still involved and working, he uses his learned skills to educate, especially the younger generations who are seeking knowledge. Welcome, Chosen.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And I'm pleased to be on the board tonight. Looking forward to some great discussions and some talks among some great people about some things that we definitely need to discuss in our community.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And last but not least, we have Raquel Nelson. Raquel immigrated to Canada. She immediately recognized the differences between Canada and Jamaica. And I am guessing that she probably didn't have a winter coat when she got off the plane. And that was how she was able to distinguish the difference immediately. Motivated by an early desire to understand the challenges of economic disparities and their impacts on marginalized persons and communities, Raquel has worked with varied groups disenfranchised by the system, from young women's groups to lone parents seeking employment, isolated seniors in need of social supports, youth with multiple barriers entering the labor force, persons with complex health and mental health issues, homeless men and women in Victoria, BC, sex trade workers, and hardcore drug users in Vancouver's downtown East Side. Raquel is deeply involved in various initiatives to challenge and do her part to disrupt systems that by design oppress youth and families in social housing. She's developing ways to better support low-income persons living with physical and developmental disabilities to secure meaningful employment, and is collaborating with other leaders to develop economic development frameworks and strategies that advance priorities in lower income communities in Vancouver and Toronto. She is bi-coastal. She is phenomenal. She is Raquel. Raquel, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm looking forward to the conversation this evening.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you all for being here. And we're going to jump into things. We're going to start out with a quick little video clip, and then we're going to dive into the discussion.
When we hear the words Black and neighborhood, the images that rush to mind are usually of some underserviced, low-income communities riddled with crime that are often referred to as ghettos or hoods. And that's because of the one-sided, one-dimensional representation that the media wants us to have. They'll never tell you about what's done to Black communities that are self-sufficient and thriving. Some of us are familiar with how wealthy Black communities in the US, like Black Wall Street, were violently destroyed by domestic terrorists. But through gentrification and other anti-Black racist initiatives, the same things have happened to rich, independent Black communities in Canada. If you've never heard of Africville in Nova Scotia, Little Burgundy in Montreal that produced jazz greats like Oscar Peterson and Joe Seeley, Hogan's Alley in Vancouver, or Eglinton West aka Little Jamaica in Toronto, then use the internet to educate yourselves about what strong Black communities look like and can look like again if we pool our physical, mental, and financial resources to make it happen. Happy Black History Month, family.
All right, so this is where we're going to jump off from here, right? I remember when we were having our little discussion before, Chosen, you were talking about the fact that the gentrification has roots, and there's a historical element to it. So I'm going to come to you first with this question. Why does race always seem to be connected to gentrification? Chosen, what are your thoughts, man? Why does race always seem to go hand in hand whenever we talk about gentrification? Why do these two seem to go hand in hand?
I mean, we just seen it in the video that was just played. Historically, history repeats itself. And not just here in Canada, it's happened in America. We see these things over and over. I just talked about Brixton in London, and it always happens specifically even in our community as well too. And it's not so much that it's our own race, it's always another race. So on top of other problems that are always happening in our community, this is another factor that we take into effect, things like redlining in the United States. And, we have to consider the factor of the history of what has taken place so many times before.
So interesting that you mentioned redlining, and we often associate that with America, but we had informal redlining here as well. Again, those neighborhoods like Hogan's Alley and Little Burgundy, and even Eglinton West, right? When you talk to some of the old timers, they will say, when we came up from the Caribbean in the 60s, and we tried to find places to live outside of Eglinton West, an apartment would be up for rent, and then we would show up, and then all of a sudden, it's not for rent anymore. And those kinds of things, those kinds of practices that are not official, but nonetheless are boxing you in and telling you you can only live in a certain place. So Lance, I'm coming to you now, man. What are your thoughts on this whole gentrification connected to race? This phenomenon of these two always being put together.
I feel that, historically they do try to slump us in, for lack of better words, into the little boxes. But as we know, most people from the Caribbean, we make the best of it out of everything. So,
Yes.
example, I remember when I was younger, whether it was the goat head or I'll say goat head especially, you go to any butcher shop and get that for free.
Mm.
And now that we have this great goat head soup, they want to charge you for it. They want to change it, put a price on it. And all of a sudden, what they thought was garbage, we went in and we did our thing to, as Black people do. Now all of a sudden they see the value in it and they want it back. Right? That's the easy way for me to
Wow. Wow. Love that. Raquel, your turn. Jump in. That's a very interesting analogy, and a very, that Lance used there. What are your thoughts?
So, and I guess in an effort to not repeat what everyone has said, I want to suggest to the panel and the audience this evening that, like when I know we'll get into the implications and some of the challenges, but for example, when we're talking about gentrification, when we're talking about some of those negative interactions, let's say between longstanding community members and newer people, those things happen. But I think I want to suggest that gentrification actually isn't the root of the issue. From my perspective, what gentrification does actually is it unearths sort of the magnitude of, all the social ills or certain social ills within our communities, in our city. So that through gentrification, now we're seeing like the blatant economic and sort of social disparities. Sorry, I don't know why I feel a little bit like shy.
No, you're good. You're making a killer point right now.
Yeah, that's how I see it, right? So I feel like when the process of gentrification, it just helps us to see vast differences between income levels, right?
Yes.
Or access to education and resources. I'm going to get to how I answer your specific question. So why we are always or usually talking about race.
Right.
And gentrification, personally, I find it difficult to describe because there's variances, right, to how people understand it and usually talk about it. But it's a process where there's economic change happening. There's change happening in the community and economic change in specific communities that haven't received a lot of investments in historically.
Okay.
And the investment now is coming in the form of real estate investments, I would say, or that's exactly what's happening, right? Yeah. Real estate investments, and then new people are moving into the communities. And so that's the change starts happening, right? Different income levels. Like education, yes, but then race and ethnicities comes into it. So like in my bio, it says that like I'm from a different country. A lot of us are, we're not born here. And I think what happens is a lot of people. So, okay, I don't know if I think I heard earlier when we were discussing. So the population in Toronto, and I'm so sorry for talking so long, but
no, you're
I
good.
just want to, okay. So in Toronto is one of the fastest growing, cities in North America. I feel like I'm not really good on my stats, but I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe as recent as 2018 or so, 2019, maybe Toronto was #1 in terms of population growth. And what that means is a lot of people are coming here. So you can't really talk about some of these things with, having some of that stuff in the context. That said, but when we're coming here, if we're lower income, we're like, I'm going to live, where it's affordable for me to live.
Yeah.
But now these places are attractive for different reasons, right? To various developers and so on and so forth. So you can't really, so that's why we're talking about race and ethnicity. Does that make sense? How I explain?
Yeah. So you're almost connecting race to the immigrant population as well. Sorry, Lance. It looks like were you going to jump in and say something?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I agree. And also, you might move into a place because it is affordable at that price at that time for you, and then things are coming in, prices are going up. But most folks in our situation, we are not getting those. Whether it's a promotion, the pay increases, the cost of living increases. So when we first move into these areas, we are able to afford it and have a good lifestyle there. But as everything raises, our salaries, our income does not. So now it looks like we can't afford to be there, but not because we can't afford to be there. We just weren't given the opportunities to be able to maintain the cost of living. We know it goes up, I think it's 3.7% every year, but most folks get that raise every year. So most folks are getting the same pay that they've been getting. Well, as we know, everything is going up, whether it's gas, rice, everything is going up, right?
Yes.
And then now they say, okay, we want to bring this into the community. Instead of having no furrows, now we're put what's the next one up?
Loblaws.
Right? So now, with what I'm making, I can't go afford to go shop at Loblaws. So slowly but surely, that's how things are changing, and we're like, okay, well, yeah, this was a perfect neighborhood for me, but now it's not because I can't afford it. I can't afford to live here for what the way the cost of living has went up, and me, when I'm taking it, has not gone up.
Sorry, Chosen, you gonna say something?
Yeah, I think those are great valid points. And then add those factors on top of that, you have the modern day redlining as well too. I'm in real estate myself, and I've heard up to recently horror stories of people trying to find rental properties, and as soon as everything's good until it's time to send an ID or it's time to show up, and as soon as the renters see that you're Black or a person of color, they don't want to rent to you anymore. So these things are happening in our community right now. And, it's not spoken on a lot, but it is happening definitely in our community.
And it's so interesting that you say that, because there's all these stories about people staging their houses and having their white friends show the house, right? And taking down their pictures and having their white friends put up their pictures in order to get the house sold or whatever the case might be, or having their white friends go to a home that's being shown, an open house or whatever, on their behalf. That's so crazy. And then to go back to what Lance was saying, it really seems like what you were saying really connects to what Raquel said about gentrification just really amplifying issues that are already there, right? Access to education or employment. We're not getting the raises or the promotions or the opportunities to move up while everything else is moving up. And this is something that was already there, as Raquel was saying, but then gentrification comes in and amplifies it, puts a spotlight on it. So let's move forward now and talk about how has gentrification impacted the Black community now in the GTA, right? Because we can talk about this happening as it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's very much spoken of in the United States, and oftentimes when we talk about Black history or just the Black experience, we often look through an American lens. But let's talk about right here specifically in the GTA. And I'm coming to you, Chosen, because of the fact that you're 10 toes around the ground where this is concerned. You just mentioned that you're in real estate, and you're also an entrepreneur in a certain spot that is really ripe with regards to this conversation. So I want you to talk about how is gentrification impacting the Black community in the GTA. You can talk about it in the past, you can talk about it presently. What's going on with gentrification in the GTA specifically?
Historically, our community is always and these are conversations that I've had with elders in our community. I've talked to my grandfather about, why don't you own these homes when they were $40,000, $50,000? Some of our elders that were in the community from the 70s and 60s that were here at an early time, and they weren't educated. They weren't told. My grandfather told me that the same process to own a car and get a loan for a car was the exact same process to get a home. It wasn't difficult. It wasn't as strenuous as it is now. They just didn't know, and they weren't thinking that. Again, education makes a big difference. Skip forward to now and what's going on now. Lance had spoke on, our income being different from many other communities, and we're being priced out. Now, recently, Toronto has become the most expensive city in Canada. We've passed Vancouver now. How does that help us when other
Hmm.
communities are growing and thriving and creating income, and we're still like at the bottom of the barrel, still trying to
Hmm.
survive, still renting? We don't get the same opportunities because again, we're in the same position as always left last.
Wow, wow, wow. So it's so crazy because everybody wants to tell you things are changing, man. Things are progressing. We're moving. But when we really put the microscope to it, how much has changed. So I'm coming to you now, Raquel, and you're as we said, you're bi-coastal, right? You're Vancouver. What are your thoughts on the Black community in the GTA and
Mhm.
how gentrification is impacting that community? And maybe you could even touch on Vancouver for us a bit, with regards to gentrification
Okay.
and the Black community specifically.
Yeah, actually, I know a little bit about Hogan's Alley, and they're going to be doing some like really cool stuff in the very near future. So look out for that. I actually want
Mhm.
to sort of tease out something that Lance said when he was talking about the goat head soup. Um, I'm going to be biased, I think, in what I'm going to say, but you have to either live or work really intimately in low income communities to understand this. And I was talking to Trisha, and I kind of said this already. It's like an I don't know, it's indescribable for me, like a sense of connection and love for and within these communities. So like, like what's I think some of what happens is because people are marginalized, because people are poor and without like outside supports, people band together in. So okay, there's problems, right? There's definitely problems, and the media um, sometimes focuses on those problems, but the truth is like there's nowhere else that you'll find the type of connection, resilience, love, um, just
Hmm.
pride, and like proud to be from a
Yeah,
place like
yeah,
Regent
yeah,
or Jungle, or even the downtown east side. I see it, like
yes.
the people that are like in their situations and in the downtown east side, but they love where they're from. And I'm
Mm.
saying that because the culture that's within lower income communities, I think one of the worst parts of sort of demolishing a community is the disruption of that culture. I can like,
Mm.
like talk about that, but
Yes.
um, culture is definitely disrupted. Um, and like, yeah, I don't know. I live in the suburbs right now, and
Hmm.
you kind of wave at your neighbors, and like you kind of go about your way.
Right.
It's not the same, right? So I think that
Yeah.
like when you sort of disrupt how, like just the
The
hood works,
vibes.
it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's one of the big things that I would probably there's many things, right? But that's one of the things that I would suggest. It's like a major sort of lost and negative impact as a result of gentrification.
Okay.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
even the way we talk about, we said earlier, and we were chatting backstage about the village raising the kids. When we're in those villages, it is everybody raising kids. You're all supporting everybody. Everybody's helping everybody. But then when now through this process, you're in a different community, we tend to be, I don't want to say embarrassed, but we
Hmm.
don't want to be our true selves. So meaning that, what I'm trying to say, like if you go to Greek neighborhood. You go outside, you can hear the Greek children talking their language.
Yes.
Asian, wherever you go, you could hear that in their language. If they go to another community, they are still speaking their language. We
Yes.
speak our language, our patois, wherever you want to call it, in our communities, and we go to another community now to live. And I remember my mom saying, Shh, "Yo, speak proper."
Yeah.
But wait, the people, the Italians are speaking their language up and down the street. But now I have to come and hush myself because they want to fit in, to speak proper. So
Yes.
it really takes away the culture and the history and the village aspect when we are not in our communities to be able to support. So I just want to touch on what Raquel was saying, because 100% it's more than just coming in and displacing people. It's displacing history and
Wow.
culture, and we don't have our elders to even tell us those stories no more. we used to sit down with our elders and say, yeah, this how things are done, this how to buy a house. Like if
Yes.
if your elder wasn't there to tell you, yeah, back in the day, I just same as buying a car, right? But we
Mm-hmm.
don't have our elders anymore because now elders are more displaced than we are.
Wow, wow. And that's so amazing that you say that because this summer I took my kids to the farmers market at in Little Jamaica there. And it's their first time seeing someone, chopping up the sugar cane and stuff like that. And they're just like, looking at the machete that he's using and just like, what is that? And this doesn't look like our kitchen knife, and all those kinds of things that like as you're saying, if that's gone, like a whole massive part of our culture is just wiped out, right? It's not just housing. It's, as you said, it's culture, it's vibes, it's all of that is just, it's gone, it's wiped out. So the loss is huge. It goes beyond, just the physical, right? So I want to, some people are making some comments here. Let's see. Tobin Cooper says, community is not as financially literate as we should be. So how do you guys feel about that with regards to the connection to gentrification? Do you feel like financial literacy would be something that would be impactful with in connection to gentrification? What I see all of you nodding. Chosen, what are you saying?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I believe it's a phenomenon right now in our community, financial literacy right across North America. It wasn't cool before, but now it's become, now our community is starting to embrace it, because we realize how essential it is to our growth. And as uneducated as some of our parents and grandparents were, I'm one not to hold blame because they did their best. They did their job. They got us one step further,
Yes.
to where we are now. So it's our turn to grab that baton and take it to the next level, so we can pass that baton on as well too as a community.
Okay. Now to piggyback on that though, because we're talking about community and we're talking about elders passing along knowledge and things of that nature. And Lance, I'm going to come to you on this one. And Raquel, I'd like to see if you could jump on it as well. Judith Rodney says, but can Black people trust each other?
Oh,
I love it.
this
Can
is
Black
a
people trust each
conversation
other?
we have around the table almost every single weekend. So we have been, I don't want to say taught, but conditioned not to trust the fellow Black man. And yes, it is a lot of it through slavery and everything that we have gone through, but it's also that notion of I. A lot of times in our communities, we would cheer for you when you're doing well, but once you start doing better than them,
Too
or
good. Yes.
then it's like, okay, well, what are you doing that I'm not doing, and I can't trust you now, and how did you get this? Who are you working with? So um, but to go directly towards your question, can we trust them? It's something that it's just been instilled in us. If you're doing well, there's something going on. Did you do something? What's the word that you say? Bandulu.
Bandulu.
Like, what did you do to get this? Or if they say, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is my plan to get A, B, and C. No, you know what? They've been burnt too many times. No. And then when you get there, you hear, hey, link me, hook me up, kind of things, right? Because we don't trust the process. We're coming from a culture now where we're saying, I can't trust the process. I need to see you do it first. And when you do it, I don't want to do the process. I just want you to hook me up.
Why?
Right? So,
Lance, you're talking to Tingz, man.
You are.
Wow. Sorry, Raquel, you got something to say there?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I 100% agree with you. But I'm going to say, yes, we can trust each other. And I think because we can't afford to not trust each other. Right? I think that so I work in housing communities, and Black people, they don't trust the man, they don't trust the government, and for good reason. They don't trust the landlords, right? For good reason. They don't trust when the landlord says, hey, we can't repair your housing on our own, so we're gonna get into a private public partnership with a developer to revitalize, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Yes.
When that happens, like at some point we have to figure out how to trust each other, and I think there are examples, right? So I think there are a lot of Black people who we trust each other. And I've seen examples now where families are moving, on the same streets. Like, so yes, they're moving out and these kind of things, but it's like there's a like a learning and understanding that, like, look at, the family unit is really important. It's really important for my grandmother to, my mom to live around my kids and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I think we're figuring out how we need to trust each other, and we're doing that differently, and we're doing that better. And just really like I just like sometimes when you're in it, so when, like as a like the group here, teachers, all that stuff, like we have to, like, it's hard when we're in the struggle and, people are kind of coming for us and, like hook me up, or
Yes.
they're kind of coming for you. But like I think we just have to understand, where all of that's coming from, be super duper patient, and like we need to just, figure out how to trust each other. It's a learning that has to happen.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And
Okay.
also, we really need to trust and to utilize the folks we have in our circle.
Wow.
I read a study the other day that in a Jewish community, the money will change hands between 6 to 8 times before it leaves that community.
Yes.
That's powerful to know that money, that whatever money is coming in, is staying there to 6, 7 hands.
Yes.
And in the Black community, it's 1 or 2 hands. I really try to, whether it's shopping Black, and this whole thing about shop Black, I have another issue with that, because I don't care if your store is a Black front. I need to know where you're getting your stuff from. So you might say shop Black, and I'm shopping for you because you're the Black person, but then are you getting your stuff from another Black provider?
Wow.
Or are you
Okay.
getting it from someone else? So you gotta always just do your research. Like, okay, yeah, I do want to support. So I know that we have people with whether it's doctors, dentists, like everything. My circle is gonna be Black first. If I cannot find it there, I will ask one of my Black friends who have someone else in that situation. So if it was a dentist, I couldn't find a Black dentist in my community where I moved into, and they're like, yeah, there's none here, but this person who I trust. I'll go with that until I could try and figure something out. But for us, it's a lot more work to do that, right? So I think, as we were saying, we have to trust and put in the work. We really need to be not really careful, but purposeful in seeking
intentional.
intentional work, and seeking out where we have the supports, where we can use the supports, and really, really, really support each other.
Okay.
I don't know why it's hard for us to trust and support. I know it's, again, historically we were taught not to, don't tell anybody your business. So,
Yes.
if I have a financial advisor, don't let it be Black, because they're going to know your business.
Yes.
So we need to just be patient and unpack that stuff and relearn.
Wow, wow, wow. And you're so right. This, like, the historical roots are deep with that. I remember my mom always saying, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing, and all those kinds of things, and being careful about, who you tell things to, and all of that. So hopefully we will start to unlearn some of these things, and we have to prove ourselves worthy before people will start trusting us too, though, right? So that's another thing. Just before we move on here, though, there's a comment from Jamie here that I see. Too often I see us running from our communities. Some equate success to how many white neighbors we have. So, what are your thoughts with that in connection, again, to gentrification, right? Because you're talking about, Raquel, you were talking about the community and the vibes and the pride and all those kinds of things. But then there is this undercurrent that says to you, like, yeah, but if you live there, how successful are you? So what do you think about that in connection to gentrification?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's complicated, right? Our ideas and our ideals in North America is the white picket fence. And the white picket fence is just, it's outside of the hood. You know what I mean? So like let's just use a different example. Sorry, I can't remember Jamie. Let's think about the Oscars, for example, a couple of years ago. And it always stands out to me, right? And I don't mean to, get
No, no.
politically or whatever, but yeah. Um, the Oscars happened a couple of years ago, and I think Will Smith didn't win an award, and it was like outrage.
Yes.
And I'm like, yo, you guys are rich. Like, start your own Oscars. Like, call it Tyrone. You know what I'm trying to say? But
we want a Jamaican name. We're gonna call it Raldan.
Right, Raldan, right? But I think, the reason why I say this is I think that sometimes, and it's just a conditioning that happens. We haven't made it until we get an Oscar. So, the NAACP awards, it's just not quite an Oscar, and I'm not trying to take away from the Oscars. The Oscar's good. So the same way, right? Like, we don't really make it until we live in Durham, right? Like, Malvern is nice, but it's not, I don't know, Ajax. I don't know, whatever the Ajax at the time was. So I think there is some of that. But I think a lot of that's happening, but I promise you guys, because I'm like in the communities and I see people making intentional, somebody used the word intentional. People are very intentional about, like unlearning and undoing some of these things, and purposely, like, I want to buy a house in Malvern. But here the thing is, now people can't afford to live in Malvern anymore, right? Exactly, because of what we're talking about. So maybe now I have my TTC job, or I'm a entrepreneur like chosen, and I have, a little savings, and I'm going to buy something. We can't afford to live in the city in the communities that we've grown up in. So it's a bit complicated.
Okay. And just before we go to the next question, and thanks for that, Janice Snag said, but is financial literacy the real barrier? Is financial literacy the real barrier? And I wanted to, because Lance was saying something there about, if I buy black, I want to know where, the individual that I'm buying from got their products. So I want to ask Chosen, as an entrepreneur, how do you connect with that? Like, how do you feel about that with regard to, it's not enough just to buy black, but where's that storefront supply coming from?
I agree, full. It's for us to be supportive of our own business, we have to support our others. And this is where we keep the black dollar, right? In our community. This is where the 6 hands, 8 hands change amongst each other. So, I mean, we have some mindsets that need to be shifted, and some ways that need to be broken, because, Mr. So-and-so down the street, sells this for $1 cheaper than my black brother. I'm gonna buy this, his stuff has to be so expensive. But not realizing, as an entrepreneur, I can't buy 1,000 of these things like so-and-so down the street. I can only buy 25 of them because I don't have access to the same capital as these guys. So again, as a consumer, there's a mindset different than the business owner as well. And we sometimes punish our black business owners because their prices might be a little bit higher than the other guys, but not realizing, again, those other guys, they work together. Different. They do group economics. The 5 of them will own 5 different stores, and they all buy in bulk, so they get the lowest rate. And all of us in our community, because we're new, and again, the education is not there to do the same process, we're pulling by ourselves, pulling. You're pulling by yourself. And again, coming together and trying to build those conglomerates is what we need to change those mindsets.
Wow, Raquel, I think you look like you have something to say. I see your hand going up and then coming down and then up.
Oh my God.
Go ahead.
I'll try to be quick. 2 things. So in my line of work, people are often now talking about home ownership and affordable home ownership. And I'm very much in support of that. But what I see is a need for financial planning towards home ownership.
Okay.
I see a lot of people who might end up, owning a home, but it doesn't last, right? Because they didn't know how to sustain that home. So they might have been able to get the down payments and get inside the home, but like there wasn't like a way to sort of stick it out. So I think financial planning towards homeownership is absolutely critical. It's a part of hopefully like in terms of like gentrification and things that happen, and a lot of people are advocating for affordable homeownership options. So I do think so, and I absolutely agree with Chosen. I think what you're talking about, and sort of the academic community, they call it like social value in the supply chain. So when Lance is saying that he wants to know where he's getting, like not just his vendor is getting something from, but where, and I think certainly in my line of work, like that's what I'm pushing sort of the vendors, right, to do, and it's necessary for us to understand that, like, I don't know, there's this term equity seeking group. So like, let's say Black people who are, marginalized, or they just haven't had the same access to these resources and opportunities. It's really important in terms of social value that like, yeah, I'm going to pay $2 because that's just what needs to happen in order to sort of level the playing field. You guys talk about like, other communities that sort of band together. They don't all like each other, right? But they just figure out. Okay. They don't like each other, but they figure out how to like, like organize and work together to keep the money in for the 6 times and that sort of thing. So that's what we need to figure out how to do also, like to capitalize on social value. So absolutely, I have to be, yes, I have to be able to afford to pay $2, but in just the long term and like how that stuff plays out for what we're working towards, it's really critical for us to think about the social value.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna jump into the next question here, and Lance and Raquel, I'm coming to you guys with this one. What is the most challenging or negative impact that gentrification can have on residents? And we kind of touched on it, but what I want is actually if we could sort of break down what are some of the features of gentrification? Like, what does it actually look like? Like, what happens when gentrification takes place? What are the features? So, Lance, what someone's talking about gentrification. What do we see immediately start to happen?
Usually, what you'll see is construction. Usually, what you'll see is little mom and pop shops start to get, for lack of better words, ran out. And you see big box stores coming in. You'll see more attention put on to the negatives of the community. That's when you see, whether there's more violence now, there's been rise in violence. We need to change this. We need to have more police officers. We need to do this. And truthfully, stats, they say stats don't lie, but if you really look at the stats, the community's violence and issues hasn't changed. The news outlet has changed on how much that we are aware of, but it hasn't really changed. Then you start seeing new development coming soon. You see things like different garbage trucks. It's almost like a movie set. They come in and slowly but surely they're putting their props in. So they're putting this in. Next you know, the grade school, because of the young community, the grade school now is going to be a high school. Well, you have all these young kids. Why is this grade school now turning to the high school? We had a community center that has free programming, or they could use a welcome policy. All of a sudden, the welcome policy is not applicable at that center. There's no more free programming. So that's how it starts to happen.
Okay. So those are some of the signs. What do you say, Raquel? What can you add to that? And what are some of the negative impacts? And I know we touched on some of them, but there might be some that you might want to delve into even further.
I think those, like we've highlighted a lot of the major ones, like in some of the communities that I've experienced, like maybe what's happening is the actual interactions between the new people and the old people, or the long-standing community members, and some of it is that term microaggression. So let's say, I don't know, you just hear, there's like a ton of stuff, right? And you're the newbie, so you're calling this place the new wherever, and you're like, but you didn't build on a desert. Like,
Mm.
this is what it's called, and it's been called that
Mm.
for a really long time. Or people, so like I said, in our communities, we have a vibe. So if the men are outside listening to some music and holding a vibe, that's, like, you don't need to call the police.
Right.
This is
Right.
our community. This is how we congregate. We're not bothering anyone. You can pull up too if you want. So it's like there's some of those interactions that there's a tension there. And then I would say exactly what Lance was saying. So sometimes in some of these projects, that happens, like, redevelopment projects, they
Mhm.
try to mitigate some of the negative impacts, but then, like, but maybe instead of like a no frills, now it's a Whole Foods. And
Mhm.
I'm living here still, but I have to, take 2 buses to go to no frills because I can't buy at Whole Foods.
Right.
So yeah, those are some of the things that are happening. And then we talked about the culture and that sort of thing.
Okay. And it's interesting that you're talking about, them trying to sort of rebrand. And with Eglinton West, I'm hearing that they want to change the name of the subway from Eglinton West to Cedarville, because they said that Eglinton West is too it brings to mind crime and Jamaicans. So they said they want to change it to Cedarville so that it's now rebranding, like really rebranding. Not just the area, but even the subway is part of this understanding of rebranding,
And I
right?
bet you
Hugely
when that
problematic.
happens, you'll see them say that, oh, the crime rate has went down now, which it wouldn't, because changing your name is not going to change the crime rate. Whether no matter what you call it, it's still going to be the same community. But you'll see how they say, ever since change happened, less crime, less this, less that. So yeah.
Mm-hmm, exactly, right. Now I want to ask, revitalization versus gentrification. Can anybody speak to that and tease that out a little bit? Revitalization versus gentrification.
Revitalization for me is, there's a park that needs to be revitalized. You need to fix the broken swing. You need to make it safer, bigger, whatever you need to improve something that's already there. So there's a park there, whatever, a bench. You're not removing it and putting something totally new in it. You're just revitalizing it. For the other one now, there's a park there. You could take the park out and you could put it in a workstation. you know, or
Mm.
there was a basketball court. Now you're gonna take the basketball court and put in a walking track, or it's one is to promote and support what's already there, and one is to change the landscape.
Ooh, okay. Chosen, you're nodding. What are you saying?
I'm glad you touched on it because I was just listening to an interview just like 2 weeks ago. The speaker was speaking on the very same topic. He didn't really use revitalization so much, but as much as the word gentrification is used. And he brought up a very valid point to me that there's nothing wrong with gentrification if it's done on ourselves.
Mm.
We have the access in our community. There was a community in America, housing community, where all the neighbors decided that we're all going to start putting together our flowers in front of our homes, and they did this for blocks, and essentially all of them together raised the value of all of their properties. That's
Mm.
gentrification, and they did it amongst themselves. So
Aye.
literally, what we're speaking on is a smaller scale of colonization, where you have these other
Ooh.
set of people who are coming in and removing the people who are there. And like I said, it's not on a mass scale, this is on a smaller scale. But yeah, it's colonization. You're taking essentially away from the people and the inhabitants of this community, displacing them and taking it for yourself. When you see the Starbucks start popping up and the runners out in the morning walking their dogs through by the man and dog, like the sisterhood saying, you know, those are the signs.
So this is like a neo-colonialism, is what you're saying. Okay. I see you smiling, Raquel. So I know I can see like you're bubbling inside, like you have something to say. So I'm gonna let you get it out, and then we're gonna move. Get it out, sister. What do you have to say?
It's different from what my brothers have said. And it just depends. so the government sort of revitalization programs, I'm not entirely mad at them, and I'll tell you why. Because in the communities, in like some parts of the city, the truth is when it rains, like their roofs are, caving in and their houses flood.
Okay. Yeah.
The infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, so the sewage systems, like have you ever seen like stuff back up in your basements? And those things are like a problem. Like I said, the people that are living in low income communities, the housing is in a poor state of repair.
Yes.
So revitalizations, some of the revitalizations that, let's say BC Housing, Toronto Housing, if you will, that they're doing. And again, like it's hard for me to, you know what I mean? Like it's touchy. It's touchy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But they sometimes, and like, like we can explore and ask our elders and people that were around in, Regent Park a long time ago, but the tenants advocated for revitalization in Lawrence, in Lawrence Heights. People advocated for revitalization because they're living in housing that is literally falling apart.
Right.
And there's a difference between social housing and, maybe just like lower income communities and social housing. And so when I say like I feel good about it, like I grew up in Jamaica, in Government Yard in Jamaica. So, and I know that like, I don't think I would have an opportunity to live somewhere that potentially, the value is $1 million and I'm the first one to like use a toilet there or something, right? Like everything is just fresh. So in some respects, it's like a really good opportunity for some of the like people in social housing. They make the poverty line in Canada is $22,000 a year. And a lot of people are living below that. Wow. They'll never be able to like afford a house, even paint, you know what I'm trying to say? So some of these things, again, like we can kind of get into, is that the best way to, redevelop or revitalize a community, and how can we do it thoughtfully and that sort of thing? But I'm not, like, I think there's a 100% a difference between revitalization and gentrification. Gentrification, like when you work in the communities, gentrification, for me anyways, it's sort of a trigger, or it kind of irks me because that's not the work that I do. Tenants, for, these like public housing landlords, they sign agreements that they come back. New policies are in place that talk about zero displacement, so that like, and that's what sort of distinguishes, I think, revitalization from gentrification. Gentrification, there is absolute displacement. Revitalization says zero displacement. So if all of you guys live in the community that I'm working in, so when we were in the downtown east side, when I was in the downtown east side in Vancouver, you sign a relocation agreement with me, your landlord, that says you're coming back in a year and a half when I've finished building this. And for the most part, 94% of the people come back. So
okay,
much different.
Okay. Yeah, and I see a comment from Judith Rodney there that says, but how was revitalization presented to the residents? So I don't know if you want to. Do you want to just touch on that just a little bit, because I think it's connected.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. It's and thanks for the question, Judith. I think in different communities. So if I'm not mistaken, in the GTA, so in Toronto, there are probably 6 or 7 communities that are currently undergoing revitalization. And the landlord will present it as an opportunity. The landlord will definitely come to a community and say, here's the opportunity that we have. And they're very intentional to involve community members. And that's why I'm saying there is a distinction between, like, I'm a developer, I'm gonna, come try to buy this like low-rise building, versus the landlord is going out and forming a public-private partnership with a developer. And like a lot of the same things can happen. So when you're working in housing communities, you have to mitigate for, you know, all these negative impacts that we've talked about. And I hope that like I've demonstrated to you guys that I'm absolutely not for the erosion of like culture and that sort of thing, and like looking for opportunities. But I think, and that's what I think is really actually important, and I hope that we can talk about this a little bit more, but it's how residents are involved in what that looks like to revitalize the community. You know, it's not just, hey, this is what our plan is, this is what we're going to do, but like, how do we do this, and can we partner to do it? So it feels a little bit more like what Chosen was talking about. It's just that can't happen on public housing because public housing is owned by the government.
See, and that partnership that you're talking about is so huge, because when we talk about Eglinton West, we understand that Forest Hill, the government and the powers that be seem to be more willing to negotiate with the residents of Forest Hill, versus, you know, those on the Eglinton strip, right? By Allen and lower down. So that being said, we want to talk about, we want to take a look quickly at a clip here, the fight to save Little Jamaica. So we're going to take a quick look at this, and then we're going to come back and jump into some, hopefully, strategies and solutions.
Hey BG Squad, on this week's Your Voice, I wanted to bring you to a community that's been in existence for more than 50 years. We're talking Little Jamaica. It's known for its vibes, its culture, its authenticity, but now it's at risk of being no more. Let's find out why. So Nika, tell me a little bit about Little, or I guess I should call it Little Jamaica.
Yeah, well, Little Jamaica, it was one of the homes of Caribbean immigration, right? Yeah. So we have the 60s, 70s, 80s of our immigration system opening up.
What does Little Jamaica mean to you?
You know, for me, it's just really about like being able to be myself. I was born and I raised in Jamaica. You know, choosing to live in this neighborhood was, you know, reconnecting with my identity, my cultural heritage. My mom went to Vaughan Road Academy. My grandmother lived in Winona. She immigrated here in the 70s. It's home.
A lot of Black entrepreneurs came and settled here, so we have a lot of food stores. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of hair.
Smell it.
As soon as you get here.
No, I'm hungry already, eh?
Listen.
This is a cultural hub. To others from the outside external, look at it as, you know, a consumption of goods. You go to a barber shop to cut their hair. But for me, my barber is like a father figure to me.
Some of these businesses have so much like history behind them. Mm-hmm. Like I know, like even like the record store, right?
Treasure Isle. This was in the era of vinyl, right? Yeah, so reggae was brought here to Toronto first in Canada.
Little Jamaica has a sense of place. It has a vibe that you can feel, sense of community.
You know, where are we going to get our services if it's not by our own people? Mm-hmm. And so Little Jamaica becomes that for us. It's where we can get our food, we can get our clothes, we can get our hair products. You know, there's a lot of barbers.
As we're walking along this strip, I can't help but notice like all of the empty businesses.
Yep.
What's happening to them?
So, I mean, you know, from the Eglinton construction alone, we've lost 140 businesses. And
like,
so
look at this. All the empty storefronts.
Literally.
We can see the LRT construction, and it's taking a huge toll on the businesses. But we also found out that there's a plan for the neighborhood. It's called Eglinton Connects. And we noticed that in that plan, Little Jamaica was not mentioned. While we are, you know, resilient as Black people, the places that we call home, the places where we live, we can't say the same for those places.
Jason, can you tell me the name of your business?
This is called Casual Beauty Salon Enterprise. Casual is the longest running salon on Eglinton West.
How have things changed for you?
From the arrival of Metro Links, and even before that, you can see they were preparing the area for a form of a gentrification. Metro Links' arrival was the icing on the cake.
You'll kind of get to see, you know, how much barricades and how much obstacles there are for folks to actually even see businesses.
I had a bus stop right here.
Yeah.
They took out the bus stop, and then they blocked off the road. So people come off the bus, and they walk and they come in, because we're right at the front. So that's eliminated. What else they've done? The parking. They limit the parking, because parking was more. But because of their whole construction, parking is less. and they're the ones parking there. So your clients have nowhere to park. So they'll tell you that, okay, this thing is gonna be a certain way, but you're not gonna benefit from it. You understand what I'm saying?
Because you won't even survive the construction.
You won't survive it. Now, these things that we're getting in COVID time, I wasn't getting this as a business during Metrolinx time. So excuse me when I say that COVID has been more generous to my business than Metrolinx arrival.
For folks who might not know what Black Urbanism TO is, tell me a bit about the organization.
The founding of this organization was rooted in the displacement that's happening here in Little Jamaica. We didn't want Little Jamaica to get lost in the shuffle. We didn't want it to get displaced. And so we saw the need to intervene.
Right now, we've actually put together a GoFundMe called the Black Business Grant to help business owners out of the pandemic.
Have you been able to help any businesses thus far?
Yeah, we've actually been able to give to 4 business owners, which has been incredible.
We want to look at how we can activate that opportunity for businesses to make sure that, you know, they can maintain their space and have a presence in Little Jamaica.
You know what I find just like crazy? So many areas, you know, in the city, they had their name on the map, like Greektown, Little Italy, but Little Jamaica didn't have that on the map.
Right, right. And I think that that's such an important piece. That's one of the things that we really want to start bringing up and having this conversation of, let's get Little Jamaica branded.
I feel like we should, you know, promote it and celebrate it and actually allow it to reach its potential, because we can't honestly say that that opportunity has been provided.
And on top of all of these challenges, these businesses now also have to deal with the pandemic. So what will become of Little Jamaica? Only time will tell.
Powerful, powerful. And, you know, those of us that are familiar with Little Jamaica, some of those faces in that video were very familiar. And just, you know, really speaking from the heart, you know, to hear the guy say, you know, my barber is like my father, right? And that connects to, you know, what Raquel was talking about, you know, the vibe and all of that's lost when, you know, when gentrification takes set. We noticed there, one of the stores that was mentioned in the video, Treasure Isle. I'm just wondering if Chosen might just give us a little bit of history on that store and what it means to that community.
Definitely. Treasure Isle is originally a record store. It was founded by Nana McLean, who was an artist in Jamaica on Duke Reed's label, Treasure Isle, the original Treasure Isle. And she migrated to Canada and brought it here with her and opened up a record store. And you know, our culture being big on music is a big intricate part of that. Little Jamaica, there's a few record stores. Treasure Isle is the last standing out of all of them. Record Factory, Joe Gibbs was down there, King Culture, he's still around. But Treasure Isle is actually, the store itself is the last out of all of those record stores that used to be on Eglinton. It's shifted and changed in order to sustain business over the years, from Natty B, put in countless hours and pushing into the community as well by volunteering on CHRY, and again, keeping the store as that hub for selectors and DJs alike and music enthusiasts, and transitioned again into a studio, natural health juice bar, and still trying to thrive in every battle is being thrown at it. And as you guys can see, Metrolinx hasn't been nice on Eglinton at all. 10 years of construction, no parking. It's detrimental to our community and the businesses there. On top of that, you know, a lot of people talk about the construction, but the closest communities to Eglinton West, just Eglinton itself, Trifui, or should we know as Chichiwe, right? You know, the Martha
Yes.
Eastway, and also Lawrence Heights, you know, what we know as Jungle. You know, a lot of people that lived in Jungle have been displaced due to the same problems. Now they've been moved out to Brampton and other places, no longer in the community to support the community as well. So those have been factors over the years that we've seen the shifts. I've seen the changes come in when I seen a knitting store open up like 3 stores down, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's real. It's definitely real. You know, and then the pet store opened up, and then, you know, like we were talking, you see the people coming around that you never seen before.
Wow. Thank you for that, man. Thank you. So, you know, we're talking about stores and businesses that are, you know, very valued to us and close to our heart and dear to our heart. So Lance, man, I'm coming to you with this here. What strategies can we use to ensure that communities with high populations of Black people in the GTA, like Eglinton, are not impacted negatively by gentrification? What can we do?
So this is a long-winded answer, but I'm trying to make it short as possible. One is we need to be responsible for our voting. We can't just be voting for whether it's a premier, mayor. It's literally our councilors, our MPPs, our, you know, right down to the last elected official that we appoint, and you know, get involved in your community, be part of the town halls. Usually, I would say with the city, before there is any kind of strategy plan laid out, there is town halls where they're coming together and saying, hey, this is, what do you guys think about this and such, and yeah, just get involved as much as possible. You know who your MPP is, your MP is, your counselor, your even your principal. Like, just know your community, be a part of the community, be active, and then again, support each other and be part of that village. I'd say those are for the short answers, the quick answers. Those are things that we really need to pay attention to and to start to do or continue to do.
Okay, thank you for that. And it's so important because that's not stuff that we talk about in our community. Voting at that level, you know what I mean? So that's really deep. That's really important. What do you say, Chosen? What are some things that we could do to try to, you know, fight against what seems to happen to us or to our communities repeatedly?
We spoke about so many factors during this whole conversation, and one that we left out was ownership. A lot of the reasons why we get pushed out is because we don't own.
Absolutely.
We spoke about a lot of the reasons why we don't own. There's a ton of reasons why we don't own as well too, but those are the key factors. When you're an owner, you have a lot more talk than when you're a renter. You know, and if we own more, then we have way more say. They can't just so easily push us out because as a renter, there's nothing stopping the landlord to say, okay, well, you know, the rent is going to be $10,000 a month. And what are you going to do? Except for vacate. And I've seen it happen to a few people on Eglinton. I've seen businesses shift from across the street to, because that's exactly what happened. Another person came and purchased the property, pushed them right out, and they had to relocate and change everything. And that's a major factor to me is ownership.
Wow.
Yes, you know, I totally forgot that part, and that's a big part. Even when it comes to things that you could do as a landowner, you know, if you want to run for a government official, a city elected official, you have to own property in that area. So when people say, "Oh, you got to be part of the hierarchy or part of the process," but if you don't own property, it's hard for you to even have a say. So yes, absolutely.
And that's something that we really need to talk to kids about, right? You know, I had the opportunity to teach an African history class, a Black history class, when I was teaching at a school in the Jane and Falstaff area. And, you know, I'm teaching them all these things and you know, pushing Black Canadian history and all those things. But I said, you know, if there's one thing I want you guys to get from this class, it's, you know, even if you don't remember the dates and the people and whatever, I just want you all to know that, you know, land is key. Land owning property is essential. And if you guys don't, you know, pass the final exam because you don't remember this, that, and next, I want you to pass the final exam of life and understand how vital it is to own, right? So, you know, we're going to wrap things up here, and I want to give each one of you an opportunity to leave us with your thoughts, your final and closing thoughts on this conversation, gentrification. We can see how sensitive it is and how important it is for us to talk about and to have these platforms where we can discuss it and even think about mobilizing an action and things of that nature. So I'm going to come to Raquel. You know, you were the last one introduced, but I want you to have the first comment as we sign off. You know, what are your thoughts that you'd like to leave with the viewing audience here with regards to gentrification in our communities?
I have lots of thoughts. So, and we talked about some of them already, and I'll piggyback on maybe what both were chosen and Lance left off. So Lance was talking about kind of advocating and going to elected officials. Maybe I'm gonna suggest when we're going to our elected officials, what we should, you know, what are we advocating for? And I think we're advocating for one, community involvement, because and what community involvement means is that if you are going to redevelop where I live, what are my priorities? What right? Like, yes, advancement to you looks like this sort of physical transformation, but what about the social transformation? What about, you know, the social development of that community? So I think community involvement is really important. I think social development then is really important. And what is social development? Again, we're talking about physical redevelopment. So I think if we can like just start to think about what has happened, you know, before gentrification on Little Jamaica, for example, like what made up the social sort of, you know, infrastructure in that community for it to be so vibrant, and how do we retain that? So if there's going to be redevelopments happening across, you know, the GTA, how do we retain some of that culture that we talked about, you know, the social development? If people are getting pushed out, and they're getting pushed out to places where, you know, they can't access transportation and all those kind of things, like we need to have sorry, I just kicked over my wire. We need to know exactly what, you know what I mean? We just want to be intentional in what we're going to our political leaders are talking about. Economic development is incredibly important. So now these big developers are coming in. Hey, we have some opportunities here. So Chosen said ownership, and we don't have ownership opportunities to live, and I'm going to say business. So it's like, if we are going to our elected officials, let's think about, and if you guys don't know, holler at me, I will tell you, because, you know, I have a blueprint for some of this stuff. We need to figure out how to have affordable housing, like, options within these redevelopments that are happening, so that, like, yeah, we're not pushing out people, but like the people that have been living here and have been like building up, you know, this community that's now so attractive to everyone, like, we need a skin in the game. And how do we get that? And there's ways to do that. Jobs and training, right? So these so it's not, again, so all of the same construction companies that are hiring, you know, their cousins and their uncles. No, let's hire some of our kids. There's a lot of ways that we can, you know, do these things, diversifying like the vendors, so that it's not, again, just the same developers or the same tradespeople and, you know, that sort of thing. And then I'm going to make a plug to learn from, you know, some of the public housing communities that have been, you know, doing revitalizations. Like I said, not the best, but what does zero displacement look like in outside of public housing? Like, what could that mean for, you know, renters that are not in a public housing setting? Like, how can we, you know? So I think it's just putting together, I'm not well versed on that because like I said, I work in the public sector, but I'm just curious to know, like what are some of the measures that we can put in place for places like Little Jamaica. But I think, and continuing to have conversations like this, I would say just to continue to educate ourselves is really, really important as we move forward.
Awesome. Lance, what are your final thoughts, man?
I agree 100% with what my sister said. But also, we also need to keep our culture, our history, and teach our children before we have them go out into the world for the world to teach them. All the things that we speak about, we say nobody taught us that. That's not taught in school, but we know it's there. So we need to start teaching our kids. I remember when my kids were doing homeschool and they were standing up for the national anthem, and I was like, wait a second, do you know the national anthem of Jamaica? Like, no. My heart almost broke. So I'm like, you know what? Every morning before you sign up for this Canadian national anthem, you're going to learn the Jamaican national anthem, and you're going to start a day that way. So I find that we need to be more responsible with our children now. As we said, our parents did the best that they could with the tools they have. We know a lot more and have a lot more access to resources and education that we need to start taking matters into our own hand, and connect with the community, be active, be present, be visible. We have everything we need, but we're just not voicing it to the right people at the right times.
Wow. Okay. Well said. Chosen, you got the last word, man. Uh-oh, you're muted, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Last words I would say is red, black, and green. Marcus Garvey. That's where the foundation was set for a lot of us. We got to keep our thoughts black, our actions black, our community black, and there's no and if around it. I've always been an advocate for segregation when it was around, because it actually forced us to buy and support from ourselves, and it taught us to be self-reliant when it was around. I don't have a problem with integrated community, but I believed that segregation was even better for us than what we are now, because again, it built up more businesses. It showed us how to be entrepreneurs because we couldn't do it in anybody else's community. We need to learn how to build our own, stand on our own, and do for our own. And this is what we need to teach for ourselves and for our future, not just here in North America, but in the continent of Africa too. Take what we learn and build here and build for ourselves.
Wow. And I feel like that's really, that really sort of summarizes and ties together everything, this whole idea of unity, right? Because even when you look at Little Jamaica, it's not just, Jamaicans that own property there or that have stores there. Or, I remember my brother going to get his hair cut at Castries, and Castries, this was back in the day, and Castries was owned by a St. Lucian. Little Jamaica is really, and this was coming from Royce and James, Toronto Star columnist. He said it should really be little us, right? Little Trinidad, little Barbados, little Jamaica, little Guyana, little Ghana, right? And as one of you guys said it already, and we all concurred, we don't necessarily have to like each other, but we do have to find some way to get along and work together. Right. So at the end of the day, all those other people in those communities that we highlight and that we look up to and that we respect, they may not all love each other or get along all the time, rather, but they do understand that they are stronger together than they are apart. And that's definitely something that we need to come together and think about and make a reality in the communities that we have and in the communities that we want to build and that we want to see. So I just want to say thank you so much to Raquel, to Chosen, to Lance. I want to say thank you on behalf of GIA Productions, and I want to say thank you on behalf of all of those who are viewing.
Yeah.
And to those of you that are viewing, I want to tell you, first of all, I want to thank you for viewing, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a commission here. I'm going to ask you all to tell a friend to watch this on YouTube, right? It's going to be archived on YouTube, and we've been, our guests have been dropping some nuggets right? Some things that we all can benefit from and that we all need to hear and that we all need to know. So I'm going to leave you with a little homework, and I want you all, those of you that are viewing, to tell 3 friends at least to go back and watch this program, please. All right? And I know some of you too, so I'm going to check up. All right? So I want you to tell your friends. That's the homework. I'm sorry, I'm an educator. I'm always giving homework, right? So, please tell somebody and let's make sure and ensure that the education that we received here tonight doesn't just stay here, but that it can spread so that we can really, really, really impact and affect change in our city and in our cities and in our communities going forward. God bless, one love, God's love, peace. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, all. Walk good.
Yo, defund them or disband them, why them versus demand them, racial profiling versus stops that are supposedly random. If we build it, they will come. Back in the day, they came with diseases, treaties, and guns, but now they come with bulldozers and city-sanctioned construction crews to give oppressive makeovers. We send our kids to you for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, seeking knowledge and not judgment, achievement and not discouragement, paying taxes to a government that funds the system but doesn't give refunds when the system systematically decreases the chances for advancement that we all deserve and hope for. I'm sick and in need of attention, but your attention is wrapped up in the retention of stupid stereotypes, believing that my problem is not what ails me, but what I look like. Join us and talk the Tingz.